Welcome to this presentation on the climate emergency. I'm Naomi Clark, Sustainability and Climate Change Officer from City Development at Dundee City Council. I'm going to talk about what climate change is, what it means for Dundee, what has been done about it, and how you can help. The most important process to understand is the greenhouse effect, a natural process whereby gases such as carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and methane act to trap heat from the sun. Without the greenhouse gas effect, our planet would be cold and uninhabitable. Instead, it results in an average global temperature of around 15 degrees. But more recently, there's been a sharp and rapid increase in greenhouse gases due to human activity. Through burning fossil fuels for energy generation, transport and manufacture, as well as deforestation and intensive agriculture, we are rapidly increasing greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. In the past 50 years alone, we've emitted as much carbon dioxide as the previous 150 years. This increase has already led to a 1-degree change in our climate with alarming results. The rise in global average temperatures is causing glaciers to melt and sea levels to rise. Global biodiversity will decrease as habitats are altered due to changing weather patterns. Now, these impacts may seem far off to us and not connected to our daily lives, but we will experience the impact of climate change directly and indirectly. Climate projections for Dundee will see us experience more destructive storms and flooding, as well as very wet winters. Hotter, drier summers will have a hugely negative impact on our water supply, crop yields, food security, and health. Our economy will be impacted as businesses and tourism experience disrupted supply chains and access to resources. Our health will also be adversely impacted, with respiratory and heat-related illnesses disproportionately affecting the vulnerable. Some of these changes are already locked in and happening as the planet has already increased in temperature by 1 degree in the past century. If we continue as we are, what's called the business as usual scenario, we could see a rise of 3 degrees by 2050. So what's being done about this? The Paris Agreement is an international treaty signed by 195 countries that recognises climate change as a global emergency that goes beyond national borders. The Paris Agreement requires countries to take drastic action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to ensure global temperature increases do not exceed 1.5 degrees. The UK will host the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference, or COP26, in Glasgow at the beginning of November. The COP26 summit will bring governments and negotiators from across the world to discuss how to accelerate action towards the goals of the Paris Agreement. This will be a momentous occasion for Scotland and climate change. In partnership with other public bodies, businesses, schools, voluntary groups and creative organisations, we're planning a series of events to mark COP26, which will engage the whole city. More announcements on these activities will be made in the coming months. So although action has been taken by all these countries, there is concern that it is not happening fast enough and greenhouse gas emissions are still rising. This led to a climate emergency being declared by many countries in 2019, in no small part to Greta Thunberg, a young climate activist from Sweden. Scotland was one of the countries that declared a climate emergency, with the Scottish Government committing to a legally binding target of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. Dundee City Council then followed, recognising the serious challenges we face by climate change and aligned with the Scottish Government's net zero target. Net zero refers to achieving a balance between the amount of greenhouse gas emissions produced and the amount removed from the atmosphere. So we know that we need a shift, or what's called a transition, to net zero, and it will be along a pathway that's going to involve huge transformations in technology, including renewable energy, electric and hydrogen powered vehicles, changes to our agriculture, reforestation and manufacture. The good news is There has already been significant innovation and adoption of technologies to reduce emissions. Technology can only take us so far, as you can see here in this graph from the UK Climate Change Committee. Wide-scale behaviour change by individuals and organisations, as well as major advances in technology, will be essential in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to safe levels. For us, this will mean a complete transformation in how we heat our homes, how we travel, what food we eat, what products we consume, and what our neighbourhoods will look like. Fossil fuels are well embedded in our lifestyles, and shifting away from these is hard to contemplate, but this transition will bring many positive benefits. Cleaner air, better health, affordable clean energy and subsequent reduction in fuel poverty, more jobs, greener neighbourhoods, better active travel and public transport links, and a better quality of life for disadvantaged groups. Thankfully, we have a climate action plan for Dundee. The plan was developed together with public, private and community organisations. It contains 64 actions across the themes of energy, transport, waste and resilience. Our goal is for the City of Dundee to reach net zero emissions by 2045 or sooner. These actions are our first step in that pathway, but much bigger changes will be required from all of us. This graph shows where Dundee's greenhouse gas emissions come from. Heating and lighting, whether for our homes, businesses or industrial use, accounts for approximately 3/4 of Dundee's emissions. 25% of emissions come from our transport. Emissions from council properties accounts for less than 4% of the city's total emissions, which is why a citywide approach is essential. I'll now take you through the 4 themes of the Climate Action Plan. Our objective for energy is to reduce the consumption of energy, promote energy efficiency, and increase the proportion of power and heat from low carbon technologies. As heating and lighting homes and properties in Dundee makes the biggest contribution to the city's carbon emissions, making buildings more energy efficient is the best way to reduce emissions and bills. Properly insulating roofs, walls, floors or windows is good practice, whether for new properties or retrofitting these measures into existing buildings. This is called a fabric first approach. We also have an ongoing programme to retrofit energy efficiency in all public buildings and have replaced all street lighting with energy efficient LED bulbs. Providing heat to buildings through district heating is becoming more common as the country begins its transition away from gas. Here we generate heat, preferably through renewable sources, and deliver it to buildings through a pipe network. The new Performance Centre for Sport is heated by Scotland's largest ground source heat pump system. As we said before, technology and materials will only take us so far. We also need to change our own behaviour when it comes to energy use. Locally, the Dundee Energy Advice Project are available to provide advice on making your home more energy efficient, ensuring your billing is accurate and assisting with benefit checks and fuel supplier issues. You can also contact Home Energy Scotland. Their advisors offer free, impartial advice on energy saving, accessing grants, renewable energy, and more. Transport is the second theme of the Climate Action Plan, with the objective of encouraging active travel through walking, cycling, and public transport, and deploying sustainable transport alternatives. As you can see here, there is a huge increase in carbon emissions between different transport options, with walking, cycling and public transport at the lower end of the scale to driving at much higher levels, which is why the transport hierarchy prioritises these cleaner forms of transport. 25% of Dundee's emissions come from transport. In addition, the particulate matter and airborne nitrogen pollution that comes from fossil fuel vehicles leads to poorer air quality and affects our respiratory health. Dundee City Council has lots of initiatives that support active travel. Cycling is the fastest growing mode of transport in Scotland. The cycling strategy aims to increase journeys made by bike in Dundee by promoting cycling as well as improving infrastructure. The Embark Dundee e-bike sharing scheme has now launched, with 150 e-bikes available to hire, making it easier to get around Dundee and up the hills without the car. The new active travel hub at the Waterfront is due for completion by autumn and will link routes along the Tay from Broughty Ferry to Riverside. The hub will provide a workshop for bike repairs, secure bike locking, bike hire and information on routes. Pedestrian zones and 20 mph zones are also being increased, making it safer and easier to walk and cycle. A low emission zone will be introduced in Dundee in 2022 in order to improve air quality to benefit public health. Drivers will receive penalties if they enter the zone in vehicles whose emissions exceed certain standards. The exact zone and exemptions are still being decided, with different scenarios being modelled to identify air quality impacts. Each year, Clean Air Day aims to raise awareness of the impact of traffic pollution on health and offers incentives for active travel. This year, Clean Air Day is on the 17th of June, so look out for incentives nearer that date. COVID has hit bus companies hard, with Explore Dundee having to reduce their services temporarily. However, once we come out of the pandemic, there is significant investment from the Scottish Government to improve services, with £500 million for bus priority infrastructure and £120 million for zero emissions buses. There's a new partnership project to introduce hydrogen buses to the city public bus fleet and the creation of a dedicated hydrogen refuelling station. The Scottish Government also has a target of 20% less car journeys and the phasing out of sales of fossil fuel cars by 2030. Dundee is well prepared for this transition. The council fleet already has 100 EVs, which is the largest of any local authority. There are now over 100 charging points, which includes rapid charging hubs with solar canopies at Princes Street, Queen Street and Greenmarket car parks, as well as new pop-up chargers on residential streets. You can find out everything you need to know about EVs in Dundee at the Drive Dundee electric webpage, including where the charge points are located. A third theme of the Climate Action Plan is waste. Here the main objective is to reduce the amount of waste to be disposed of in the first place, so buying less and reusing items is the highest priority. As well as wasting resources and requiring significant energy and land to dispose of our waste, much of the waste we produce ends up in the sea. 80% of waste in the ocean comes from land, either as litter blown by wind or carried through storm drains to the sea. It is therefore essential to produce less waste and to always pick up litter. This is where the circular economy comes in, where businesses and consumers work together to make things last and get as much value from our products and resources as possible. So rather than take, make and dispose, we repair, reuse, refurbish and recycle. In Dundee, several options are available to help us reduce waste. There's furniture reuse at Baldovey, many charity shops in the city centre, the community fridge in the West End, which reduces food waste by taking food from outlets that is safe to eat but cannot be resold and making it freely available to the community. Next year, the government will introduce a new drinks bottle deposit return scheme, whereby you'll be able to take your bottle back to retailers or vending machines and get back your deposit. This will help to reduce plastic single-use waste. Circular Tayside is a local venture that creates and supports a network of businesses looking at changing their processes and products to reduce waste. And Dundee City Council is supporting them as well as embedding circular principles into our own services. The Council also has a plastic pledge to minimise plastic waste across services. Where reduce and reuse are not possible, the next priority is recycling. Dundee currently has a recycling rate of 38%, but the government has set a recycling target of 70% by 2025. All food waste will also be banned from disposal by 2025. This is an area that will require full cooperation of communities and businesses in order to reduce this waste. It is essential that every citizen takes their time to place the correct items in their recycling bins. So having identified these initial actions, we now need to work out how they will impact on our net zero target. We've been trialling innovative new software from Climate View to help us measure emission savings of different actions within the Climate Action Plan. We will soon publish a dashboard which shows where we currently are on the pathway to net zero and how the various actions, strategies and targets all fit together. You will be able to access this via our website. It will be fully interactive and will allow users to model different carbon saving scenarios for the city. So energy waste and transport are mostly made up of what are called mitigation actions, namely those actions that will reduce carbon emissions. As we said in the earlier slides, looking at the climate science, some climate change is still inevitable, and so we need to ensure we adapt our communities as well as our natural and built environments in order to reduce our vulnerability to those impacts that are already locked in. And so we need to build our resilience. A climate risk and vulnerability assessment undertaken in Dundee across these 10 sectors identified impacts on infrastructure, services and communities from flooding, excessively high temperatures and extreme events, as well as economic impacts on business and tourism due to disruption and supply chain issues. So what are some of the measures we can take to build our resilience to climate change and these impacts? Improving green infrastructure across the city will help us address many of these issues. This means using planting, green spaces and water bodies, including parks, allotments and cycle paths, to help with stormwater management, reduce heat stress, improve air quality, increase biodiversity and provide more opportunities for food production. One great example of this is where new flood protection along Broughty Ferry is being integrated with active travel routes. These routes are also being planted with wildflowers. This scheme will not only reduce flooding, but it will also help improve air quality, connect communities and increase biodiversity. The work of the Green Health Partnership is making the most out of Dundee's green spaces as a health promoting resource, and the food growing strategy will help address food security and increase social cohesion. The Eco Schools programme helps schools focus on topics to make the whole school more sustainable and link with wider curricular objectives around science, citizenship and sustainability. So as you can see, there's a lot going on in Dundee in response to this climate emergency. However, we recognise that much more needs to be done. Dundee City Council will keep driving this forward to build on our achievements. But we need everyone to play their part and we hope this presentation has helped you with this. If you have any questions, you can email us at sustainability@dundeecity.gov.uk. Thank you for watching.